I stand in the $100 million mansion in Cape Cod, where my father's dreams are preserved, but my husband, Ryan, secretly changed the ownership of the house to his name, betraying me as soon as my father passed away. What dark secret lies behind the smile that once made me fall in love? The story of inheritance, deceit, and the journey to find myself begins here. When I stepped into the foyer of my childhood home that morning, it didn't feel like stepping into luxury. It felt like stepping into memory. The floors, polished to a quiet gleam, still held the echo of my father's footsteps. The grand staircase curved upward like a spine, strong and familiar, its mahogany railing smooth beneath my hand. Light streamed in through the massive windows, catching the dust in midair and making it shimmer like the past was still alive in this house. The Cape Cod estate, now valued at over $100 million, never felt like a monument to wealth. To me, it had always been a monument to him, my father, his values, his dreams, his legacy. I stood in the center of the main hall, letting the stillness wash over me. Max, the golden retriever we'd rescued 5 years ago, at my side, his tail gently thumping against my leg. He seemed to sense my emotions, as he always did, resting his head against my knee in quiet solidarity. "You remember this place, don't you, Max?" I murmured. He looked up at me with those deep, understanding eyes. It had been 3 weeks since the house officially transferred to my name. I hadn't rushed to move in. Something in me had resisted perhaps the enormity of what this place represented, or maybe I already knew, on some level, that it would change things. And I was right. Ryan arrived late that afternoon. He'd stayed behind in Boston to take care of work matters, though I suspected he also needed space from the emotional gravity I was steeped in lately. When he walked in, his gaze didn't linger on the family photos still lining the hallway, or the antique clock that had belonged to my grandfather. Instead, his eyes swept over the marble floor, the chandelier, the view from the bay windows. He let out a low whistle. "Emily," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "This place is massive. I told you it was big." I replied, gently, "But it's not just about that. This house is worth a fortune," he interrupted, turning toward me. "I mean, what's the plan? You're going to keep it all?" The question felt like a needle. I tried to laugh it off, moving toward the living room. "It's not something I've thought through entirely. It's home. Ryan, it's where I grew up." He followed me, leaning on the arm of the sofa. "Yeah, but Emily, this place is a gold mine. You could sell half the land and retire tomorrow. Or rent it out. Or hell, convert it into a luxury event venue." I sat down slowly, Max curling up at my feet. "I'm not looking at this house as a business opportunity," I said, careful to keep my voice even. "It was my father's dream. He worked his entire life to protect it, preserve it. He wanted me to keep it in the family." Ryan scoffed under his breath barely, but I caught it. "I just think it's a waste to let something this valuable sit around." I looked at him, then really looked. We'd been married for almost 6 years. Ryan, with his easy charm, boyish smile, and that undercurrent of ambition that had once made me feel secure. But now, that same drive didn't feel like protection, it felt like hunger. He noticed my silence and moved closer. "Look, I'm not saying sell it all. I'm just saying, maybe it's fair if we both benefit from it. Right, I mean, we're married." The words hung in the air like smoke. And suddenly, I was 8 years old again, sitting at the kitchen table while my father explained why I wasn't allowed to flaunt our wealth at school. "Emily," he said, gently but firmly, "money is like fire, useful, powerful, but dangerous. If people see only that, they forget who you are. So always, always protect it. But more importantly, protect yourself." Back then, I hadn't understood what he meant. Now, I did. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Ryan, I think we need to have a conversation. A real one." He tensed. "About what?" "About this house. About expectations. About boundaries." His face changed just for a second. Not anger, but something sharper. Disappointment. Calculation. I felt it in my chest like a pressure drop before a storm. Max stirred beside me, his ears twitching. "I'm not trying to start a fight," I said. "But this house isn't just a property. It's part of my family's story. I'm proud of it, but I won't let it become a wedge between us." Ryan stood, brushing imaginary lint from his jeans. "I'm just trying to help us think big. Emily, that's all." I nodded slowly, but I wasn't sure I believed him. As the evening sun cast golden stripes across the floor, I walked through the hallway alone, touching the walls like they were sacred. Every creak of the wood, every shadowed corner held something I cherished, memories of my father's laughter, my mother's garden parties, summer thunderstorms and winter holidays. And now, this house carried something else, a question, a tension, a warning. I wasn't ready to name it betrayal. Not yet. But something had shifted, and I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The rain had started tapping against the windows of the Cape Cod house, soft and steady, like fingers brushing glass. I sat curled on the old armchair in the library, my father's favorite room, surrounded by the scent of leather-bound books and cedar shelves. Max dozing at my feet. It was one of those quiet, gray afternoons that invited memory. And lately, I had found myself drifting backward more often than I'd like. Back to Newton. Back to a time before Ryan. Before grown-up complexities, lawyers, and bank accounts. Back to simpler pains. I was 10 when the first rumor started. We lived in a modest-looking house on a tree-lined street in Newton, Massachusetts. It was only modest on the outside, of course. Inside, it had heated floors, hand-carved furniture, and a wine cellar my mother barely touched. But my parents were experts at making wealth invisible. I went to public school like everyone else. My clothes were clean but never designer. My lunchbox held peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, not sushi or truffle pasta. To the world, we were just comfortable. To my classmates, I was just Emily Harper, the girl who liked drawing horses and didn't like gym class. That changed the day Anna fell in gym and broke her Game Boy. It was an accident her backpack slipped off the bench, and the console hit the floor with a sad little crunch, but the fallout was anything but accidental. By lunch, everyone knew what happened, and by the end of the week, the whispers began. Emily could buy her a new one. Someone said, her dad's loaded. Doesn't she have, like, a mansion? Lily, Anna's best friend, cornered me near the lockers the next day. She's really upset, she said. Her parents won't buy her a new one. They said it was her fault. You could help. I blinked. Help. How Lily gave me a look, like the answer was obvious. Buy her a new one. Or lend her the money. I mean, it's not like you'd miss it. I stared at her, stunned. My father's voice echoed in my mind, soft but unwavering. You don't owe anyone your money. Emily, generosity is a choice, not an obligation. And wealth, real wealth, doesn't need to be proven. So I told Lily no. And just like that, I became the villain in someone else's story. By the following Monday, the whispers had grown teeth. Emily's cheap. Emily's fake. Her parents hoard money. She could have helped, and she didn't. I came home in tears, my throat tight with the injustice of it. I expected comfort, but instead, my father sat me down at the kitchen table. His hands folded, his gaze steady. He asked for the whole story, and I told him every detail. When I finished, I waited for him to tell me I'd done the right thing. Instead, he said, we need to clear this up, but not with your friends, with their parents. The following weekend, Anna and Lily were invited over with their families. I was mortified. I remember hiding in the hallway, peeking through the slats of the banister as my father welcomed them in with calm precision and a cold smile. He explained the situation clearly, firmly. No drama, no apologies on our part, but he made it clear that what had happened to me being shamed for not funding a friend's mistake was unacceptable. By the time they left, there were awkward apologies and sheepish glances. Anna hugged me. Lily barely looked at me. But it was done. That night, my father found me in the garden, sitting on the old stone bench beneath the willow tree. You did the right thing, he said, and now you've learned something. What's that? I asked. That you don't need to explain your money to anyone, he said. People will always have opinions. That doesn't make them entitled to anything, but it still hurt, I admitted. He nodded, brushing a leaf from my hair. It always will. That's why you choose carefully who gets close. You give people your time, your trust, your heart, but not your checkbook, unless you want to. That lesson stayed with me. Through college, through early adulthood, through years of keeping my career and finances private, even when I had nothing to hide. And now, sitting here decades later, as Ryan's words from yesterday still echoed in my mind, we're married. Shouldn't we both benefit? I realized why the unease felt so familiar. It wasn't the money. It was the assumption, the entitlement wrapped in charm. The expectation that my inheritance was not mine, but a resource to be negotiated. Ryan wasn't Lily, and this wasn't middle school, but the feeling was the same. A quiet betrayal of boundary. Max stirred beside me, his nose twitching in sleep. I reached down and stroked his fur, grounding myself in the present. I knew I couldn't rewind the clock, but I could remember what it had taught me, and if I'd survived that sting as a child, I could weather what came next as a woman. Before Ryan, I had a well-ordered life measured, quiet, and wrapped in careful layers of privacy. I built my career in digital banking with a quiet kind of ambition. Rising through the ranks at one of the most competitive fintech firms in Boston, I kept my head down, avoided office gossip, and made a habit of paying attention while saying little. Money had always followed me like a shadow, but I'd learned long ago to keep it silent. I lived in a modest townhouse just outside Cambridge, kept my name off any articles or interviews, and never once mentioned my family estate, not even in whispered conversations over drinks after work. It wasn't shame. It was protection. Then I met Ryan. I was 35. He was 30. We were introduced at a colleague's birthday party at a brewery in Somerville, one of those noisy nights where laughter blends with clinking glasses, and everything feels a little less heavy. He was a friend of a friend, tagging along and slightly out of place in his button-down shirt and easy smile. I noticed him because he noticed me, but not in the way most men did. He didn't ask what I did. He asked what I read. We talked about Murakami, late-night cereal, our favorite moments in bad movies. He made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months, and when I told him I worked in finance, he simply nodded and said, "That sounds like something you're really good at," without a trace of the usual curiosity or calculation. I fell fast. I fell quietly. He was different, or so I thought. We dated for a year. Ryan was sweet, attentive, full of enthusiasm for life. He sent handwritten notes, cooked clumsy breakfasts, left flowers on my desk at work. He wasn't wealthy, but he wasn't ashamed of that either. He worked in community development and talked passionately about urban design and affordable housing. When he proposed kneeling in the garden of the Cape Cod estate where we spent a long weekend together, I said yes with my whole heart. Our wedding was held right there, beneath the blooming dogwoods, with just close friends and family, strings of lights in the trees, and the ocean humming in the background. It was romantic, honest. It felt real. But real things can crack. And they don't always do it loudly. It started with little comments. We had just returned from our honeymoon and were unpacking at the Boston apartment when Ryan casually asked, "So, how much do you think the Cape house is worth?" Now I looked up from my suitcase. I don't know exactly. A lot, I guess. The land alone is probably worth more than we realize. He whistled low. "You ever think of selling, I mean? That kind of money could set us up for life." I laughed lightly. "No, it's not just a property. Ryan, it's my family's history." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course, just wondering." But the wondering didn't stop. A few weeks later, we were at dinner with friends when Ryan brought up the estate again, this time joking that I was the hidden heiress of Cape Cod before leaning in to say, "You'd never know she has access to millions." Right? It was said with a smile, but it landed like a punch. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't want to make a scene, but I felt the air shift between us, subtly, quietly, like hairline cracks in glass, imperceptible until they weren't. One evening, we were walking Max through the Boston Common when Ryan suddenly asked, "So, how much do you actually have? Like, in assets?" Roughly. I stopped mid-step. "What?" He smiled. "Trying to play it off. I mean, I'm your husband now. Shouldn't I know the ballpark?" I stared at him, the wind catching the edge of my scarf. "You want a spreadsheet?" He chuckled. "Come on. Don't be like that. I just want to understand what we're working with." I kept walking. "We're not working with anything. I inherited something. That's different." There was a long silence after that. Later that night, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing and wondering when something so beautiful had started to feel like a negotiation. Was it naive to believe love could exist untouched by money? Or had I just failed to see the signs? I remembered my father's words again. Choose carefully who gets close. I had chosen Ryan with my heart. But now, my instincts, the ones I had learned to trust, were whispering a warning I couldn't ignore. He hadn't done anything wrong. Not exactly. But it was the questions. The way he lingered on numbers. The way he lit up when talking about what we could do with all that land. The way his tone changed when we were alone, as if he was recalculating our marriage as a shared portfolio. I wanted to believe in us. I wanted to believe in the man who once wrote me poems on napkins and danced with me barefoot on the kitchen floor. But now, every time he touched the subject of my inheritance, I felt something inside me retreat just a little more, and I couldn't help but wonder, did he love me, or did he love what came with me? It was a Tuesday morning when my mother called. I was in the middle of an online meeting, nodding at charts I wasn't really processing, when her name lit up on my phone. I answered without hesitation, even before muting myself. Something in me already knew. Her voice was brittle, like something pressed to the edge of breaking. "Emily, it's your father. He's in the hospital. It's cancer. Stage 4, pancreatic." Everything around me seemed to blur the numbers on the screen. The muted faces in little boxes, the click of my keyboard. It all slipped away. I barely remember the drive to Massachusetts General Hospital. I just know it was gray and raining, and I cried the entire way there without making a sound. Dad was sitting upright in bed when I arrived, thinner than I remembered, with deep hollows beneath his cheekbones and IV tubes that made my heart lurch. But he smiled when he saw me. "Still the same eyes," he said softly. "Just wiser now." I sat beside him, holding his hand. I tried to be strong, but there's no preparing for the moment when your foundation starts to crumble. In the days that followed, I shuffled between the hospital and my laptop, answering emails in sterile hallways, pretending like my world wasn't slipping through my fingers. Ryan visited once. He stood awkwardly near the foot of the bed, offering a tense smile and a bouquet of flowers he forgot to unwrap. Afterwards, in the hospital cafeteria, he leaned across the table, voice low and measured. "I've been thinking," he said, "with everything going on, it might be smart to talk to a lawyer, just to understand what your legal rights are when, you know." I blinked. "What are you talking about? I mean, inheritance," he said. as if that made it better. It's going to get complicated. Maybe your mom has plans. Maybe your dad had old wills. We should protect ourselves. I stared at him, heart thudding. Ourselves. I remembered Lily in the hallway at school, asking me for money. I remembered the sting of my father's words, protect yourself. And yet, I said nothing. A week later, my father passed. He died just before dawn, with my mother holding one hand and me holding the other. His final words to me were barely audible, but I heard them with absolute clarity. Keep joy in the house. No matter what, the reading of the will was quiet, respectful, as expected. He left the Cape Cod estate to me, no contests, no surprises. The house, now valued at $5.5 million, had never meant more and hurt more than it did in that moment. Ryan was silent in the car afterward, but I could feel the tension rolling off him like a tide. He was somewhere far away, in a space filled with appraisals and dollar signs. Maybe we should move in now, he said suddenly. We could renovate the back lot, add a few units, make it profitable. I turned to him, stunned. You want to turn my father's house into an investment property? I'm saying it's smart, he replied, almost impatient. It's what he would have wanted. It's a legacy. No, I said, voice sharp. He wanted joy, not condos. Ryan clenched his jaw. You're being emotional. And that was the beginning of the end. The real betrayal came 2 months later. I came home from a long day at work to find Ryan at the dining table. A folder spread open in front of him and a look of triumph on his face. I did it, he said. Did what I filed to have the deed transferred to both our names. I froze. What are you talking about? You can't just transfer ownership like that. He leaned back, smug. I bought the paperwork from a guy named Derek, real estate fixer. He specializes in this stuff. Took care of all the gaps. It's done. My skin went cold. You what? He slid the papers toward me. I recognized the template, cheap, crooked margins, a forged notary stamp. It was laughable and horrifying. You forged legal documents to claim ownership of my inheritance. I secured our future. He snapped. You can't just keep this all locked up in your name like it's sacred ground. We're a team. No, I said, heart pounding. We're not a team if you go behind my back and commit fraud. He stood abruptly. Don't make this dramatic. Emily, I paid $400,000 for this. It's done. I walked to the safe, pulled out the real deed, stamped, sealed, notarized with the authority of my father's estate and our family attorney. I dropped it in front of him like a gavel. You're not on anything, I said quietly. You never were, and now you never will be. His face paled. You planned this? No, I whispered. You did. The days that followed were a blur of legal consults and emotional wreckage. I filed for separation, froze joint accounts, changed every password. There was no confrontation, no screaming matches, only silence, and then clarity. That night, I walked into the Cape Cod house alone. Max met me at the door, tail wagging. I fell to my knees and buried my face in his fur, sobbing in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since childhood. It wasn't just the loss of Ryan, it was the death of the illusion that he had ever truly seen me. And yet, beneath the grief, something else was stirring. Resolve. This house had always been my sanctuary. Now, it would become something more. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after loss, the kind that echoes, the kind that follows you from room to room like the scent of something burnt. After Ryan left, and the lawyers stopped calling, and the headlines about fraudulent property claims faded from the local news, I found myself in that silence. And at first, I let it swallow me. I stayed in bed for days, drank too much tea and not enough water. Watched the light change on the Cape Cod walls my father once painted with his own hands. Max lay at my side like a silent sentinel, never pushing, just there. But eventually, the silence began to shift, not because it grew smaller, but because I grew stronger inside it. One morning, as I sat in the old garden chair overlooking the ocean, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and wild lavender, I heard my father's voice again, not literally, but in that deep place where memory becomes instruction. Keep joy in the house. He didn't say survive. He said joy. It started with a conversation. My mother had come by with a basket of warm blueberry scones and a heart still raw from grief. We sat on the porch in our matching fleece robes, hers blush pink, mine charcoal gray, watching the waves roll in. I keep thinking, I said, about what he would have wanted for this place, not just to be preserved, but alive. She turned to me, curious. Go on. He loved celebrations, family, the garden. What if this house could be all of that, not just for us, but for other people too? She sipped her tea. A wedding venue, not just weddings, I said, warming to the idea. Reunions, retreats, a haven. She smiled then, a real one. Haven by the sea. And just like that, it began. The transformation of the house wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. We kept the bones intact, the sweeping staircase, the original fireplace, the oak-paneled library, but we breathed new life into it. We restored the greenhouse and turned it into a floral studio. The guest rooms were redone with soft linens and light wood accents. We added a deck by the pool, strung lights through the trees, built a pavilion with ocean views. Every corner had intention. Every corner had joy. It took almost a year of working with vendors, landscapers, and planners, a year of learning zoning codes and hospitality software, a year of Max chasing butterflies in the new garden while my mother and I argued over table linens and laughed over rosemary lemonade. And through it all, I began to feel whole again. Then came the memorial service. It was held at the little white church just off Shoreline Drive, the one where my father used to sneak peppermints to the children in the back pews. I was standing near the altar, wearing a navy dress and my father's watch on my wrist, when I saw him. Ryan, thinner, paler. His shoulders slumped. His once pristine posture caved in. He stood at the back of the church like a shadow, eyes scanning, lips pressed tight. And then he walked toward me. I held my ground. "Emily," he said, voice rough. "Please, just a minute." People were watching, but I didn't care. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. "I lost everything. The job, the apartment, the friends who wanted what I had, not who I was." He looked older, broken, but something inside me stayed still, detached. "I never should have touched your father's house," he said. "I never should have tried to take what wasn't mine." He reached out, a shaky hand moving toward mine, and I stepped back. 2 security volunteers from the event local boys who had known my father appeared beside me almost immediately. "Please escort him out," I said calmly. Ryan didn't fight it. He simply nodded. Before he left, he looked back once. "I did love you," he said. "I know," I replied, "but you didn't respect me. And love without respect isn't love at all." He turned, and just like that, he was gone. That night, I returned to Haven by the sea. The candles were still lit along the paths. The ocean was whispering its eternal lullaby. I walked through the garden barefoot, letting the cool grass remind me that I was still here, still whole. I thought I would cry. But instead, I smiled. Ryan had been a chapter, but this life, this home, this peace was the story. In the weeks that followed, we hosted our first wedding, a young couple from Vermont, madly in love and nervous as teenagers. I watched them dance beneath the lights, their laughter echoing through the trees, and I felt something bloom inside me. Gratitude, not just for surviving, but for becoming. On summer mornings, the garden hums with life. The roses open early, stretching toward the sun in slow motion. Lavender dances in the breeze. Guests sip coffee on the terrace, wrapped in terry cloth robes and smiles, the ocean sighing softly in the background. Haven by the sea has become more than we ever dreamed. We hosted 15 weddings in the past year, 8 family reunions, dozens of anniversaries, baby showers, writing retreats, and even a silent meditation weekend that Max the ever-faithful retriever somehow managed to photobomb with a tail wag and a sandwich in his mouth. Every time I walk through the main hall, freshly polished and lit with warm sconces, I think of my father, his voice, his eyes, his quiet, steady hands, the way he used to tap the banister and say, "This house is meant to hold joy." And now it does, not just for me. For everyone who steps through its doors, my mother has become my closest partner in both business and heart. We bicker over napkin patterns and menu selections, but we end each day walking side by side through the garden, Max trailing behind us. She's stronger than she's ever been, warmer, too. Grief, it turns out, can become a bridge when shared honestly. The house that once felt heavy with memory now feels alive with purpose. We've kept touches of the past intact: my father's study, untouched but for a vase of fresh flowers, the stone bench under the willow tree, where I used to sit as a child, but the rest has evolved. It's no longer a museum to what once was. It's a living, breathing legacy. A few weeks ago, I got a message from a mutual friend, someone who knew both Ryan and me. Back before everything cracked open. "Thought you should know," she wrote. "Ryan's in New York now, working for a nonprofit. Seems like he's doing okay." I read the message twice, waiting for something to rise, but it didn't. No bitterness, no ache, no longing, only stillness. And, maybe, the faintest touch of peace. I'm not sure if I've forgiven him, but I no longer need to. Letting go doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes with the simple decision to stop looking backward. I hope he finds what he's looking for. I have. What I've learned, what this journey has etched into my bones, is that money, if untethered from integrity, can destroy what matters most. But when paired with love, and intention, and truth, it can build something beautiful. My father's true legacy was never the house. It was in the quiet wisdom he passed down, the way he taught me to hold my ground without raising my voice, to choose people for their character, not their charm, to know the difference between love and possession. It was in how he lived, and how he asked me, in his final breath, to keep joy alive. As I sit on the porch now, a warm breeze drifting in from the sea, I watch a young couple walk through the garden. They're touring the venue for their spring wedding. The woman wears a soft yellow sundress, and the man's carrying a folded brochure, grinning nervously. They pause at the stone bench beneath the willow tree. She turns to him. He takes her hand. And in that small, quiet moment, I see it again. Joy, not the loud kind, not the kind made of fireworks and confetti, but the kind my father meant, the kind that lives in honesty, in effort, in renewal. I am not the woman I was when Ryan asked for a spreadsheet of my worth. I am not the girl who let silence swallow her truth. I am Emily Harper, 42, strong, rooted, awake. And this is not the end of my story. It's only the beginning of the part I get to write entirely for myself.